Hey all, it's Iggy, and I'm back again with another too long didn't watch video. This time of Rob's interview with the developers of Diablo 4. The extremely quick, too long didn't watch version, Rob's interview went into more details about potential changes being made from the PTR feedback, among other various topics. I'm going to quickly go over some of the highlights. Please be advised this is not everything spoken about during the interview. I mostly focused on what was more or less confirmed among a few other tidbits that I think people will find helpful. To start out, we'll go with the general changes. Monster HP and damage was reduced on the PTR even though it wasn't noted in the patch notes. Bosses in particular got a nerf ranging from roughly 10 to 60% depending on the type of boss. Layer bosses being on the lower end, 10%. More gold will be dropping from monsters going into Season 11, roughly 800% more. There have been talks of boss materials going into the material tabs, but the trade-off is not being able to trade them. Please note, this isn't scheduled, we're just going through talks. In regards to items, cooldown reduction has been added to gloves as well as rings, and the weight stat of cooldown reduction is the same as your average affix, making it roughly 4 times as common. Sanctification's intent was to be for when you have multiples of the same or similar item. This would help potentially make an even greater version of that item. Indestructible will more than likely be removed for something else. They also plan to beef up Sanctification across the board. They mentioned no more losing your cooldown reduction on your greater affixed Shiko, or getting the exact same aspect on your item you just sanctified. Going into pits, Belial's eyes in the pit no longer need to be activated and will be proximity based, meaning you just have to move close to them to activate them. Lower experience and obols not dropping in the pit was an unintended bug on the PTR. In regards to the tower, long-term plans for the tower include rewards for the tower, which are separate from the rewards for the leaderboard. However, these will not be present in Season 11. Classes and balance. Character balance is roughly built around pit 80 to 85. Sork Teleport and Barbarian Leap had to be brought down to normal levels. Colin mentioned that if you want to have the Teleport Sork build again, you will have to equip the Oculus. However, he did not go into specifics of exactly what that meant. The Melted Heart of Selig is also going to be much more tame. It should now roughly double your resource pool with a higher damage to resource ratio. The resource cap has also been removed. Once again, these are just the highlights. If you want the full details, please continue on with the video. If not, I'll see you in the next one. For those who stayed, there will be a link to the original interview down below, along with a link to the forum post of the full transcript on the Diablo 4 forums. With that out of the way, I'm just going to go over a quick introduction of those involved. Rob was the interviewer, and he is a well-known content creator within the Diablo community. He's known for his extremely efficient build guides, tier lists, strategies, and high damage gameplay in his Diablo content. Next up, we have Colin Feiner. Once again, he's been with Blizzard roughly 11 years. He's worked on Diablo 4 for 6 going on 7 years. Currently works on systems and combat for Diablo 4 and is the lead live game designer. Last but not least, we have Zavin H. I'm not going to pronounce his last name. He's been with Blizzard since 2008. He's been with Diablo since 2010, including Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls. His current role is Associate Game Director. I apologize, Zavin. I mentioned that you were the game designer or developer in my previous video. I'm correcting that. He is the Associate Game Director. Before we start, I want to mention that I've cleaned up the phrasing of most of Rob's questions. The goal here is simply to trim the fat and make things a bit more concise while keeping the intent of what he was asking. If you want the full, unedited version, I recommend watching Rob's actual interview video. This one is meant to be more of a quick breakdown of the discussion. Question 1. Starting with the leveling experience, right now, running through the campaign seems to be one of the most efficient and rewarding parts just for leveling up your character. I like that the campaign is good and rewarding. Was it designed to be the best way to level up even in comparison to going into higher difficulty and leveling up there? TLDR. We don't like the disparity between the campaign and the rest of the game. We need other vectors to create a satisfying and lucrative experience for leveling. The early levels from 1 to 20 feels too fast. We want to slow this down a bit, but also take out some of the time from the 50 to 60 leveling portion. We want to upgrade the experience rewards in higher difficulty tiers, such as for Nightmare Dungeon completion, whispers, that sort of thing. The Season's Journey should also be another replacement for the campaign, but it's currently missing some experience hits, so we're looking into that. Follow-up question to that. Killing the maggots in Helltides was great, but the experience orbs gave the same experience whether you did them on normal or expert. Is that something you also might want to look at? Colin says, definitely something we're looking into. There was a problem where all the maggots were dropping experience globes also, which was creating a crazy insane leveling curve. It's something we're going to fix. Rob said, leveling felt great. I was initially worried because we didn't have too many skill points to begin with. I think you tuned it all pretty well. Colin follows up by saying, we forgot to add it in the patch notes. However, we did make a pretty big change to baseline monster health and damage. Give or take, monsters have roughly 60% less health at level 50. Rebalance had to be made due to the lack of skill points you start out with. They wanted skill and paragon points you earn to feel like actual rewards. In regards to the capstone dungeons, I noticed the bosses often feel like they are overwhelmingly tanky and not really that engaging. This applies to Diablo 4 in general too. Are there any plans to rework some of the boss designs or numbers to make the fights less about it being a damage sponge and a bit more interesting and dangerous as well? TLDR. On the tower end, there was a scaling bug. That will be fixed going into Season 11 to bring the bosses more in line. Bosses across the game have roughly a 60% HP nerf, which then carries over into smaller nerfs to layer bosses, roughly a 10% nerf to Duriel, for example. When it comes to the new affix pool expansion, it feels hard to get certain affixes like when you're enchanting. Are there any plans to have better targeting with enchanting rather than just pure RNG, or perhaps adding another affix option? As right now, we have 2 affix options and then the option of no change as the third option kind of deal. TLDR. We've added cooldown reduction to gloves and rings. We've changed the weighting of cooldown reduction to be the same as your average affix, which makes it roughly 4 times as common. We haven't quite reached the item modification or slot machine of crafting loot yet. We think we have a lot of vertical growth, but not enough of how to make this item really cool and awesome if it doesn't start out that way. Follow-up question. Is that also something you're looking to do on amulets? Are there any plans to make it easier to get affixes on amulets? Colin says, yeah, run some more Undercity. I'm just kidding. We're always looking at this in the affix list. We're always trying to make sure that the affixes that do roll on base gear have some use or purpose. I think life per second is in that category, where it's really hard to put a nail on it. Well, it's really good early. Does that mean we should take it out of the pool entirely in the endgame? It's something that the team struggles with. Rob follows up by saying, the problem is what it's competing against. So if you have life per second and 10 multiplicative damage, either the life per second needs to be absolutely crazy, or that passive needs to be a +1, or maybe there's a cap of only 1 or 2 passives on the amulet. In theory, you could have 4 passives on the amulet in Season 11. Quick follow-up from Colin. Diving deeper into philosophy, it's good to have affixes that are clearly not for your build. This creates that sort of high and low feeling. If the amulet was always reliably good, you wouldn't have that dopamine hit on a triple passive. We've heard this on the tempering and masterworking that we've taken out the high highs and low lows, so it feels flat now. We do look at this, and we do like the dopamine jackpot of multiple passives, but it's probably too much right now, like 1 in a trillion. We want to be careful with removing too much at once, so we'll slowly chip away at it and dial it in. In regards to the attack speed caps, we have 2 different attack speed stats. Have you thought about simplifying this and making itemization more clear? Colin says, absolutely. Something we don't like, and we're working on making it better. Nothing to share right now. However, it's on our radar, and it's something we're going to make better. As a philosophy thing, I kind of hate caps also. As a team, we don't really like caps. It's Diablo, right? That is something we're looking at for attack speed and things like that. We want to make sure that it is clear that if we do have caps, the information is being displayed. Ideally, we don't have caps. That's something we're trying to balance around. In regards to sanctification, many players don't see it as optional, but rather mandatory to sanctify their gear. Obviously, they have a chance of bricking it at the end of the item progression. How do you respond to this perception, and what is the original intent behind sanctification? TLDR. Original intent of sanctification was supposed to be a final gamble moment. You have a bunch of swords that are similar, and you want to get a better one, so you'll take a gamble that can potentially make it better than what you have equipped. Seasonal mechanics, however, have the expectation of feeling really good and powerful. Sanctification was a little more conservative on this approach, and we've heard the feedback. It's not as exciting as a seasonal mechanic. We are looking at making it more exciting for Season 11. Difficult for us to strike that balance of adding in something really cool and exciting while keeping things diverse. For example, if we added Chaos Uniques as a permanent feature, we don't want everyone to run around with the same 4 mythics and Chaos Armors, which narrows down build diversity. Zavin says, there's mixed reactions and feedback. Part of the community feels they put in the time and they get to the place they want to go. Another part of the community says, no, I just want any crazy stuff to be able to happen. Hyper rare, super difficult, etc. We want things to be crazy cool that can happen, but not necessarily feel required and out of reach. It's a constant balancing act. Follow-up question. I think the community is very split on this. A few follow-ups. With the way things are going, would you consider allowing a little post-sanctification like edits? For example, letting us add sockets or letting us swap the aspect? Because it happened to me. I had an aspect equipped, sanctified the item, and got the exact same aspect. Colin says, I think right now we really like the idea that it's a final step. I think it's important that you sort of like have this moment of, oh, should I do this? Because I think it adds the anticipation and drama of the moment. And I think the more we allow modifications in post, it's sort of a slippery slope. Well, why not enchanting also? And why not changing the temper? Certainly something we're willing to get feedback on. We do want to try it in its full form of full gamba. I think there's some nice things we can potentially look at. Like, yeah, if you have this aspect, maybe we won't roll that aspect because that's literally worthless. I think it's definitely something we'll take feedback on. Follow-up question. Maybe you can reduce the level requirement to 0 instead of making it indestructible, or something like that. Colin says, yeah, we're looking at removing indestructible. Current perspective right now is that it's a seasonal power. We're going to go crazy with it. If we bring it back, it'll be a lot more conservative. Going into Season 11, we're looking at tying the bad rare outcomes to rare items and keeping those away from the higher quality items like mythics, for example. Just as another example, it's not super cool if your Shaco gets the greater affixed cooldown reduction removed, so we'll probably remove that. Going back to the toughness topic, do you plan on keeping pit and tower monster damage scaling the same, or would you consider at some point having the higher tiers maybe make them more dangerous on the very high tier? TLDR, we've chilled out on damage scaling from Torment 1 to 4. It was getting to be too aggressive. We plan to scale monster damage at some rate past Torment 4, roughly some amount every tier after. Within reason, of course, as you start to hit diminishing returns on your EHP again. We want the player to consider their defensive choices, not just run around as immortals. We want the player to make a conscious choice of whether or not to engage an elite kind of thing. Sometimes in the pit you have monster shortages. With the addition of Belial and the eyes, this is alleviated some. However, in the thick of things, these can be hard to activate, whether you're on a controller or keyboard and mouse. Would you consider making them easier to activate? Zavin says, yeah, I'm really excited that we're being able to try some crazy stuff in the pit, and I know it starts kind of simple, but now that we have this tower off to the side, we can start to do some kooky stuff here. The monster shortage thing that you're talking about is something we actually attack very specifically in the tower, so in the future, the hope is to actually backport that stuff and eliminate that issue entirely in the pit. For Belial specifically, once Season 11 launches, when you get near the eyes, they'll pop. You won't have to actually do the hard interaction. I farm pits now for glyphs, experience, and obols. On the PTR, experience was nerfed and the obols were completely removed. Can you explain this? Was it bugged? Colin says, yeah, it's definitely a bug. It's a bug that the obols aren't dropping. We did some experience changes on the back end, and we're looking into why there's such a big disparity right now. In regards to experience gains, how do you plan to make higher tier, more challenging pit content in Diablo 4 rewarding enough to compete with the efficiency of lower tier, speed focused runs? TLDR. Current difficulty tiers can feel either too easy or too punishing, a feast or famine. We want smoother progression so players have more meaningful challenges. We still want easy farmable content to remain effective and enjoyable though. The pit will follow this approach, tied to torment tiers. The goal is to create peaks of challenge that are rewarding without removing accessible content. Are there any plans to improve pit map generation to reduce dead ends, backtracking, and fishing for the right map? TLDR. Tower map regeneration has been rebuilt to reduce dead ends, which will eventually funnel into pits as well. Should be more obvious you're heading to a dead end if you're paying attention. Narrow, more tunnely sections are being removed until a better solution can be found. Tower is all about consistency. Pit will be more chaotic. We have to establish the baseline for the tower first before we can go hog wild on the pit. It'll be a work in progress. Could you give the tower a stronger, more distinct identity from the pit, perhaps with unique visuals, structures, or an introductory quest? TLDR. It was out of convenience to have them lumped together at the obelisk in Saragar. Eventually, the tower will have a better identity. The goal will be to allow the player to not always be trapped in Saragar forever. When will the tower have rewards and features like Inspect, and why should casual players bother engaging with it in Season 11 beta? TLDR. Tower rewards and features such as inspecting players will be long-term plans, not in the Season 11 beta version. The Inspect feature will allow you to see what others did to complete that particular tower at that level. The tower itself will eventually feature gradual rewards per tier, such as getting a reward at level 1, 5, etc. Leaderboards will also have their own separate rewards. Halo cosmetics were mentioned that would be specific to the character who obtained them and would not apply to the account or alternate characters. These rewards won't be in place until they iron out the tower more. Are there any plans to add UI pop-ups or notifications for tower rankings similar to the dopamine hit broadcasts in Diablo 3? Zavin says, absolutely. What we have right now is good. It's functional. It can do a simple layer of communication for this to not feel like nothing happened. The plan is eventually to embellish a lot more to give more information, to provide information about your rank, potentially where you sit in relation to other people and things like that across the leaderboard. We've got big plans for the communication layer of this as well. How does the team evaluate class balance in Diablo 4, and is it tuned around a target tower or pit level that builds should be able to reach? TLDR. Pit scaling is being reduced, so viable builds should be getting another 5 to 10 tiers respectively. We're trying to cut back on the multiplicative power creep. Ideally, pit level 80 to 85 is where they want builds to hit. Try to architect the game in a way to give you satisfying endpoints. We want players to ask themselves what to do after they've reached a milestone. So the tower and pit are going down 5 to 10 tiers, so Torment 4 difficulty stays roughly the same as it was in the PTR, right? Colin says, yeah, roughly the same. Monster damage is a little lower in Torment 4. Would you consider raising or removing the movement speed cap to help slower classes like Necromancer and Druid feel more fun and keep up with Sorceress's speed instead of just nerfing perma-teleport? TLDR, Sorc teleport power will return through the use of the Oculus as a balanced compromise. Leap was also out of control and had to be brought back in line. We see extreme speed as a symptom of poor difficulty and reward scaling rather than just a cap issue. We want monsters, difficulty, and rewards to scale better, so you don't feel compelled to move 50 screens a second. In regards to the Melted Heart of Selig, How do you plan to balance overperforming builds like Hodabarb, Druid, and Necromancer without relying on hard caps that limit creative, high-resource stat stacking playstyles? TLDR, while we try to do some insane things, this in particular was causing some insane problems. The resource cap felt bad, so it was removed. However, the heart will now roughly double your resource pool with a higher damage to resource ratio. How do you plan to balance buff-dependent builds that rely on snapshotting, such as the Cataclysm setup from the PTR, while keeping those interactions interesting but not mandatory for optimal play? TLDR. The team dislikes snapshotting that relies on gear swaps or luck, such as Overpower. They want to move toward duration-based buffs to help reduce the luck-based snapshotting. Overpower is one of the bigger problems when it comes to snapshotting. It'll be a work in progress as they look into more egregious mechanics. Rob goes on to ask a few questions about previous seasonal mechanics. The developers just say they have to find the right time and place to put it into the game. It has to fit, not just be thrown on top. One quality of life feature many people have asked for: is there any chance we can get a sell all button at the vendor? TLDR. We'd rather you get gold from killing enemies as opposed to picking up all the crap on the ground and selling it. In Season 11, monsters will drop way more gold piles, which scales with difficulty tiers, upwards of 800% or something insane like that. Elites can also potentially drop up to 15 piles of gold if you get really lucky. Would the team ever consider an auction house or in-game trading market? I know this has been asked a lot. Is there any hope or development on this? Zavin says, not currently talking about doing any additional trading systems or anything like that. Quite the opposite right now. We're primarily focusing on what is the version of solo self-found that can be in the game. Honestly though, never say never. There are no plans, but that doesn't mean there is never a plan ever in the history of Diablo 4. Who knows? However, it's not on our radar right now or something that we're even thinking about. What do you think about the DPS meter or something, at least like maybe in the target dummy area? Colin says, there's no plans right now. I think it's something that we obviously like giving players stats. As Zavin was saying about the tower wanting to give more information to the player, it's not a never thing. It's just currently we aren't looking at it right now. That doesn't mean that we're never going to add it. It's a priority thing. Where do we want to focus our time? This is something we know the players want, so as it becomes more of a priority to players, it's definitely something we can take a look at. Zavin says, you can think of the tower as being this streamlined thing. If we're really successful, it starts acting as the benchmark and the benchmarking tool. Right now, what other information we might need to provide you with your run, we're really making sure the tower can actually provide that. Boss materials, I think you increase the stack size. I don't think it's enough. Can we have it stack up to 999 or something? I still have all these stacks in the inventory so much, just filling it up with the lack of stash space right now. Colin says, I'll ask a cheeky question. It doesn't mean we're changing anything. I want you to think about this, and I want to know what your chat thinks. A lot of this would be a lot easier if we could just make this a currency. That obviously comes with a lot of trade-offs. It's something we've talked about. Hearing feedback on that would be really helpful. If it was all currencies, it would make this significantly easier and more manageable. Rob asks, I guess it wouldn't be tradable in this case is what you're hinting at. Colin says, exactly. That would be the trade-off. Rob says, I think it would be okay. Right now you can't really share the boss kills anyway. I'm totally okay with that. That sounds good to me. It also fixes some of the problems we have in the past of some of the multiplication of some of these items. I'm all for it. That sounds good long term. In regards to clans, it feels very bare bones in Diablo 4. Are there any plans in this direction for the midterm future or something? TLDR. Not really what he's asking for, but they say the leaderboards will have filters for friends and clanmates eventually. They want to make sure whatever systems they bring to the clan is going to be a useful fit within the Diablo 4 game. As an example, the armory. Not nearly as many people use it as they did in Diablo 3, mostly due to all the nuances of swapping out builds in Diablo 4. Therefore, we want to really look carefully before we add in more systems to the clan, see if people will actually use them. However, if it's something that people are passionate about, please let us know and give us your feedback. Would there be a chance for a rebirth feature? TLDR. Something that's been talked about before, but no timeline on it. Not even a guarantee at this point. We know it's a problem of space for character slots. With tower rewards coming in mind, we have to think about how that ties into as well. Various aspects to consider if it ever comes to Diablo 4. There recently was an announcement for Diablo 4 coming to China on the 13th or 12th of December. In parallel, there's this event called the Game Awards. Should Diablo fans be watching that? What do you guys think? Zavin says, everyone should be watching. Yes, we're going to watch it too. This is the end of the video. If you made it this far, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.